Anybody making more than $400,000 will see a small to a significant tax increase. If you make less than $400,000, you won't see one single penny in additional federal tax.
How are you going to get a Republican vote for a tax increase?
Oh, I may not get but I'll get the Democratic votes for a tax increase. It almost is getting to the point where democracy's having a hard time functioning.
No need for bipartisanship. Democrats may go it alone on tax hikes and new spending, and President Biden is now open to Senate filibuster reform. Joining me now to discuss is Kristin Tate, the Hill columnist and author of The Liberal Invasion of Red State America. Kristin, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
So here's what I want to start with. We get this rhetoric all the time that, look, the tax hikes are coming, but only for people above $400,000 in income, which means it's not going to affect everybody else. But that's just not true, isn't it?
That's exactly right. This would affect a lot of working Americans. And, you know, fresh off of the passage of this $1.9 trillion partisan relief package, the Democrats are just salivating at the prospect of more big government spending. And Joe Biden is justifying what will be the largest tax hike in a generation by saying we need the money for infrastructure. Well, a $2 to $4 trillion infrastructure bill would probably be a Trojan horse for more expensive left-wing initiatives like a radical climate plan, and his tax hikes on high income earners aren't indexed for inflation, so they could easily hit middle income earners in years to come. He also wants to raise the corporate tax rate after a year of crippling government lockdowns that have been devastating to businesses, and studies show that corporate tax hikes are borne 50 to 70% by laborers. So this would be a job killer. It would drive down wage growth, and the big question we should be asking is, how does any of this make America more prosperous? Well, it doesn't. It just grows the size, scope, and power of the federal government. And unfortunately, that seems to be the goal of many of these Democrats.
You know, I hear the argument from President Biden. He's saying, all I want to do is bring tax rates back to where they were under George W. Bush, as though that was the right amount, and as though the year 2000 or the early 2000s are analogous to the situation we're in right now. We're in a very different context right now. Global competition for capital, for businesses, is very different. This is a moment, it seems to me, when we have to be more competitive than we were then. Would you agree?
Exactly right. This will just make us less competitive. But for Biden and his left-wing allies, the big solution to every problem is more taxes. And every single time they characterize tax hikes as just impacting high earners, but they almost always end up harming middle-income earners as well. I mean, even take a hike on the capital gains tax rates, which he also says he wants to do. This will incentivize people to take their money out of the stock market, which could pose a huge problem for middle-income earners, because the stock markets are a major driver of growth for 401ks, retirement plans, pension plans. So, you know, if Democrats were serious about making us competitive and actually helping working class Americans, they would try to incentivize job growth, and they would let people keep more of their hard-earned money. And frankly, they would not be chasing corporations out of the U.S. to other places with more favorable environments.
You heard the president talk about his fear that democracy isn't functioning, and that's his rationale for wanting to get rid of or reform the filibuster. But Kristin, you've written about taxes. You've written about the process of legislation making. Part of the point of democracy is for things to not happen when there's not broad consensus. That seems to be the issue we're dealing with right now when it comes to spending and when it comes to taxes.
That's exactly right. And that's why the filibuster exists. It's to protect the minority. If the Democrats remove the filibuster, which a lot of left-wingers want to do, to be clear, Biden said he wants to reinstate the talking filibuster, but a lot of his left-wing allies want to just remove the legislative filibuster altogether. That will come back to bite the Democrats, because after the next red wave, Republicans would be able to pass a whole host of conservative initiatives that currently can't meet that 60-vote threshold. I mean, they could pass education reform that would help school choice, protections for gun rights. They could pass right-to-work measures. So the Democrats need to be very careful about what they do. And Joe Biden campaigned on being this big uniter, but a lot of his rhetoric has signaled that he has no intention of uniting with anybody who's not fully on board with the left-wing woke initiatives that are being pushed by the Democrats right now.
Kristin, when I hear the word reform, I always think, watch out what's next, because it usually means something far different than reform. Thanks so much for your thoughts today, Kristin. Really appreciate it.